Nobody knows.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This will be a review of session 8. So, right? Yeah. So today is session 9. Okay, so we started with, this session was about the manifestations of nifaq, or hypocrisy, beginning with Ayah 8 of Surah Al-Baqarah. We talked about the 3 archetypes of the community. The person of taqwa, the person of kufr, and the munafiq. So the person of taqwa is the person of demonstrating piety. It's the type of person we ideally all strive to be. And we had the chart of the outward versus the inward behavior. So the person of taqwa outwardly is a practicing Muslim, strives to be a model member of the community, strives to promote good and do good, and is also sincere, is a sincere believer, believes in their heart that this is truth, and seeks to follow the guidance of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and worship Allah. The second type of person, the person of kufr, or rejection, outwardly is a non-believer, does not ascribe to the system of belief of Islam, rejects the truth of Allah, the truth of His Messenger, peace be upon him, and inwardly they may or may not actually believe, but they reject either way inwardly. So whether they think there's a hint of truth in this or not, they consciously choose to reject. The third type of person is the munafiq, or the hypocrite, the person who outwardly is a believer and associates with Muslims, associates with the believers, tells them, I'm one of you, but inwardly is not a believer. They are a kafir inwardly. And then we talked about a fourth category, which doesn't really have a title, a person who outwardly is a non-believer, but inwardly is actually a believer. So Umar asked, who might this apply to? So it would apply to someone who is living under some sort of an oppression. So whether at the time of the early Muslims in Mecca, where they were persecuted, if they were to hide their believe inside, but outwardly not display, that was seen as okay, because Islam is meant to be the path of ease. You don't have to risk your life just to take a stand, even though many of them did. Also, in today's context, there are quite many Muslims who embrace Islam, but they cannot outwardly be Muslims because of the social setting that they live in, either their job or many times their own family. They don't want to risk alienating their family. So, also, we also talked about how if we look at the Quran from beginning with Al-Fatiha and the first few ayahs of Al-Baqarah, how Allah introduces this system of belief by starting with happy things, mercy, kindness, forgiveness, before moving on to punishment, chastisement, this and that. And there is a da'wah, or an outreach lesson in this, to start with the happy and the good things before introducing the bad things, but typically in your typical Sunday school environment, it's the opposite. It's, fear Allah or else punishment, hellfire, brimstone, all of this. So this kind of is unwinding what we all experience in Sunday school, for me especially. So then we talked about munafiq, or hypocrisy, the 2 types. There is munafiq fil aqeed and munafiq fil amal, hypocrisy in creed and hypocrisy in action. We also talked about how the true believer considers himself, would never feel so strongly comfortable in their own practice that they wouldn't consider themselves maybe being a hypocrite in some way. And a prime example of this is the story of Umar ibn Khattab, how he feared his whole life that he was actually, inside he was actually a hypocrite. And this is super companion number 2, of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So the main moral of the story is not to point at others, these people are hypocrites, but to look inwardly, am I really a hypocrite? So that was kind of a general lesson before we went into the specific ayahs. We started with ayah 8. We went over 4 manifestations, or 4 characteristics of hypocrisy. So number 1 starts ayah 8. Talks about how hypocrites, they lie outwardly. They say we believe in Allah, but they don't believe. Then Umar posed a provocative question. If one disobeys Allah, then someone is putting the commands of Allah as secondary. So then are we worshiping something other than Allah? Are we committing shirk? So we had that discussion. And the ultimate conclusion is that no, only the Prophet, peace be upon him, himself and Allah can define what shirk is. When we do something that may disobey Allah, we're just committing a sin. It typically will not rise to the level of shirk, right? Let's leave that to the Prophet and Allah. Let's just focus on just not committing sin. And then ayahs 9 through 14 continue with the other 3 manifestations of nifaq, or hypocrisy. Number 2. They deflect any sort of criticism. In their hearts is a disease. So when one says to them, lost my, when it says to, in ayah 11, when it says unto them, do not make mischief in the earth, they say we are only making peace. What are you talking about? So they deflect. And they will typically change the subject, so to speak. And they are indeed the mischief makers, even though they perceive not. Number 3, they're very arrogant. They look down upon others, judge others, the quickest to point out the wrong everyone else is doing, and mask or not even acknowledge their own faults. And number 4, they're very two-faced. They behave one way when they're in the company of believers, and then when they leave, they behave completely the opposite, and then they even mock. They said, well, we were only joking. We weren't really serious about what they were doing. So they're liars, they deflect criticism, they're arrogant, and they're two-faced. So we should try to look for these qualities and look inside of us, do we display this sort of behavior? And then ayah 16 goes into the net effect. They choose error for short-term gain. So they may gain a little bit of whatever it may be in this life, but they're sacrificing their entire hereafter. And in reality, it's a double loss. So they lose guidance in this world, and they lose forgiveness and paradise in the hereafter. Then we talked about the essence of hypocrisy, essentially being distrust of Allah. We talked about the root of the word nifaq, it being a tunnel that a small animal would make in the desert with 2 openings. So if you were to chase, or if the predator were to chase the animal through one, it can always get out. The analogy meaning that they're on the fence, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So then we moved on to ayah 17, talking about metaphors, imthal, and we talked about how in the Quran metaphors are used very often to instill a lesson. So the metaphor in ayah 17 is about a man kindling a fire and the light spreads to all. Then Allah takes away the light of the hypocrites, leaving darkness for them. And for the hypocrite, they are even repelled by light because it exposes them. Kind of like when a light turns on, cockroaches will scurry away also. Deaf, dumb, blind, they do not return as ayah 18, meaning that they close off all avenues to their heart. And then we went, did we go on to ayah 18? Yes, we did. So we went to ayah 19 and 20, talking about continuing with the metaphor of lightness, about how they act when a rainstorm from the sky comes and there's thunder and darkness, which is a danger and is, brings out a defensive reaction. Their reaction to this sort of a warning is to simply plug their ears and pretend it doesn't exist, like an ostrich sticking its head in the ground. It doesn't take away the threat or danger, it only covers your own warnings from the danger. And then the lightning from the storm, when it flashes, that they'll only move and walk when it flashes, not recognizing that this is a danger, they could die. And when it's dark, they're frozen in their footsteps. They're trusting the lightning, which can kill them essentially. So their lack of their nifaq, which is a lack of trust, is causing them to freeze, and they're exposing themselves to this deadly danger. And so, because they don't trust, they can't move forward. So this is the essential that took us through ayah 20, actually. And it covered hypocrisy and nifaq. So we continue with ayah 21.
Very good.
That was a really confusing metaphor.
Yeah, it's a very long metaphor too. Yeah, I got a little confused myself. 12 minutes. It's kind of